This happened a couple years back early fall. I want to say around October. My wife, Lissa, and I had just packed up and left our apartment in Chicago to fix up an old farmhouse in a tiny village in Ohio. I'm not going to name the place, but I'll say this. The population doesn't even hit 400. We made the move to renovate the property her grandparents left her, thinking the low cost of living and the space would be a fresh start. The only thing that really got to me was how silent it was at night. Like, our closest neighbor was a 10-minute walk through the woods. So if the power went out, I was basically on my own. Lissa loved the quiet, though. She's always been able to tune things out. Anyway, this one night, it was a cold, and she was asleep because she had an early shift at the clinic. I was wide awake with insomnia, just staring at the ceiling. I remembered I hadn't dragged the trash bins to the curb for pickup the next morning. Lissa usually reminds me, but she'd forgotten too. So I figured I'd just get it over with, so we didn't miss the truck. We've got this one cat, Bolo. He's a heavy orange tabby who usually sleeps all day. He was awake too, pacing by the back door and whining to go out. I felt bad leaving him cooped up, so even though it was pitch black and freezing, I decided to take him with me while I did the trash. I figured he wouldn't wander far. So I threw on a hoodie, grabbed the trash bag in one hand and Bolo in the other, and stepped out onto the patio. It's a concrete slab that overlooks a big, open field behind our place. The moon was out, so visibility wasn't too bad. I tossed the bag into the bin and set Bolo down, thinking he'd just sniff around the porch for a minute. But the second his paws hit the ground, he didn't sniff anything. He bolted. He tore off the porch and ran straight toward the tree line at the edge of the field. I was annoyed more than anything. I started walking after him, calling his name quietly, because I didn't want to wake Lissa up. I wasn't scared. I'd spent enough time in the woods to know that being nervous at night just makes things worse. I got maybe 50 feet into the tall grass when I realized how quiet it had gotten. No crickets. Nothing. Then I saw Bolo. He was standing at the edge of the trees, his back arched, hissing at something in the dark. Now this cat has never hissed like that before, so that definitely made my stomach tighten up. I stopped dead. I squinted, trying to see what he was looking at, but it was just shadows. I thought maybe it was a stray dog or a fox. So I started backing up slowly, not wanting to make a scene. But then, maybe 30 feet to my left, something heavy dropped out of the trees. I whipped my head around, and that's when I saw it. It was a person, but they were crouching on all fours in the grass, hunched over like a spider. He was wearing a yellow raincoat that was way too big, and on their head was a plain white mask, the kind you get at a hardware store, but it had these dark, messy holes cut for eyes. I froze. My brain literally refused to process what I was seeing. The figure wasn't moving, just watching me from the ground. I remember thinking, is this a prank? It didn't make sense. Then Bolo screeched and ran past me toward the house, and that broke the trance. The crouching figure didn't stand up. It started scrambling toward me fast, like unnaturally fast, using its hands and feet to gallop. It didn't make a sound, just the rustling of the grass. I spun around and I ran. I'm not a runner. I sit at a desk all day, but I have never moved so fast in my life. I could hear that wet slapping sound of hands and feet hitting the dirt right behind me, getting closer. I honestly thought I was about to get tackled and killed in my own backyard. I made it to the porch, slipped on the concrete, and scrambled up, slamming the sliding glass door shut just as a hand slapped against the glass. It was a gloved hand, covered in mud. I locked the door, backed away, and grabbed a kitchen knife, yelling for Lissa to wake up. By the time she got downstairs, turning lights on, the thing was gone. There was just a smear of mud on the glass. We called the police, but they found nothing except some weird indentations in the grass, where I saw it crouching. To this day, I have no clue who or what that person was. But I will say this, if Bolo hadn't hissed and snapped me out of it, I wouldn't have known they were there until it was too late. That cat got the expensive treats for a week. And yeah, I haven't stepped foot outside after dark since, and I don't plan to. I grew up in one of those tiny farm towns where the corn outnumbers the people 10 to 1. You know the vibe. One stoplight, a diner that closes at 5, and the biggest news is usually about whose cow got loose on the highway. It's quiet, which I normally like, but sometimes the silence messes with your head. I've always been a jittery person, to be honest. I have pretty bad anxiety, which makes me jump at my own shadow. I'm constantly worried that I'm overreacting to nothing, that my gut instinct is right and I'm actually in danger. It's an exhausting loop, but it's kept me safe so far. So it was around 9:30 p.m. when I realized I was out of soda. I decided to make a quick run to the dollar store on the edge of town. It's not far, maybe a 10-minute walk, but it involves cutting through the old church parking lot. As I was crossing the lot, I saw a guy standing near the dumpster. He was wearing a high-vis safety vest over a hoodie, which isn't that weird around here, since a lot of guys do road work at night to avoid the traffic. He was holding a clipboard and staring intently at the ground, like he was counting cracks in the pavement. I immediately felt that ping of nervousness, but I told myself to chill. He was just a worker taking notes. I pulled my jacket tighter and kept walking, making sure to give him a wide berth. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge me at all, just kept scribbling on that board. I grabbed my soda and started the walk back. When I got back to the church lot, I scanned the area and didn't see the safety vest guy near the dumpster anymore. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But then, as I passed the side of the church building, I saw him. He was standing about 20 feet ahead, right in the middle of the sidewalk I needed to take. He was still holding the clipboard, but now he wasn't looking at the ground. He was facing directly toward me, pen hovering over the paper, totally still. It looked like he was waiting for me to step into a specific spot so he could mark it down. My stomach dropped. I froze. My anxiety screaming that this was a trap. That was enough for me. I asked to use the phone to call the non-emergency line. I hate dealing with the police, mostly because I'm terrified they'll think I'm just some paranoid nutjob wasting their time. But I wasn't about to walk home past clipboard guy. The dispatcher took my info and said they'd send a car to patrol the area. I waited in the store for 20 minutes, sipping my soda and shaking. Eventually, a cop car pulled up outside. The officer came in and told me they'd found a guy, matching the description, walking near the creek. They said he didn't have any ID on him, and his clipboard was just full of random scribbles. They basically told me I did the right thing by not engaging and offered to drive me the rest of the way home. I accepted the ride, obviously. I still can't walk past that church lot without looking over my shoulder, wondering what he was actually trying to measure. I moved to a small town last year because it was the only place that offered me a 1-year contract for the exact position I needed, and the job came with a decent salary and a rental house thrown in, so it made sense on paper. The house was a small single-story place on a side street just off the main road, with a short front yard and a narrow porch that faced the sidewalk. It was the kind of town where everything you needed was within a 5-minute drive, and everything else you'd have to order online or drive an hour for. But I told myself it was temporary, so I could deal with it. For the first month, it was just quiet. I'd walk to the little grocery store, drive to the clinic, come home, and maybe sit on the couch with the TV on until I went to bed. The street outside my house never seemed busy. A couple of cars in the evening. The same dog walkers going past at the same times. A delivery truck now and then. I learned my neighbors' faces pretty fast, even if I didn't know their names. The first time I noticed him was a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd stayed late at the clinic to finish some paperwork and didn't get home until almost 8. It was already dark. I turned on the porch light, unlocked the door, and as I stepped inside, I glanced back out toward the street. A man was standing on the opposite sidewalk, a little to the right of my house, just outside the glow of the streetlight. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there with his hands in his jacket pockets, facing my direction. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was waiting for someone or walking a dog I couldn't see, or just taking a smoke break. Small town, not a lot of places to go. People stand around, that kind of thing. I locked the door, turned on the light in the front room, and went about my night. Every so often, I'd pass by the front window and catch a glimpse of the street, and he was still there. A little further down now, but always angled toward my house. By the time I went to bed, he was gone. A few days later, it happened again. Different day, different time, same man. This time I saw him as I was closing the curtains. He was standing directly across from my front yard, looking toward the house. He wasn't right up against the curb or anything. He was on the far side of the sidewalk, like he was pretending to pay attention to the houses on his side of the street instead. As soon as the curtain moved, he shifted his gaze, like he didn't want to get caught staring. After that, I started noticing a pattern. He never showed up during the day, when I was home on a weekend or if I sat on the porch after work. It was always in the early evening or later, when the inside lights were on and it was dark outside. If I turned off the lamp in the front room and moved to the kitchen, he would drift a bit further down to where he could see that side of the house. I mentioned it once in passing at work, not as a complaint, more as a small towns are weird kind of comment. One of the nurses asked which street I was on, and when I told her, she just said, "Yeah, that's an older part of town," and then moved on to a different topic. Another coworker said something like, "Everyone watches everyone here. You get used to it," and laughed. Nobody asked what he looked like or if he was bothering me. One night I decided I was imagining the whole thing. I told myself maybe it was a few different people, and I was just blending them into one in my head. I left the front lamp on and sat in the hallway, where I could see the edge of the living room and a bit of the window without being seen easily from outside. After a while, I heard footsteps on the sidewalk, slow and even, the way someone walks when they aren't in a hurry. The footsteps stopped in front of the house, and then there was silence. I waited. I could see the rectangle of the front window, with the curtain pulled almost all the way closed. The gap on one side showed a slice of the porch railing and the street beyond. There was a shape there now, just enough to know someone was standing in that space. Instead of getting up and turning off the light, I stayed where I was. After a minute, the shape shifted closer. I saw a bit of his face through the gap, just the line of his nose and mouth. He wasn't using a phone or smoking this time. I must have moved slightly, because his eyes flicked from the center of the window to the edge where I was. I couldn't see the color, but I could tell he had adjusted to the idea that I was not just a vague shape inside anymore. I was a person who was aware of him. We looked at each other like that for a second or two, him outside in the dark, me in the hallway out of the main light. Then he took one step back, turned, and walked down the street without looking back. I locked the door even though it was already locked, and checked the back door and all the windows. Nothing was open. There were no footprints in the yard that I could see from the porch. Nothing moved. It was the same quiet street, the same empty road leading back to the little main drag, with the diner and the pharmacy, and the clinic. I thought about calling the police, but I kept hearing what they'd probably say in my head. He was on the sidewalk, public street, not on my property, not knocking, not shouting, not trying the door. He was just standing there, just looking, in a town that size, where everyone already knew where I lived and where I worked. It did not feel like something that would go away if I made a fuss. The next evening, I got home before dark and sat in the front room with the lights off. Cars went by. A couple walked their dog, An older man from 2 houses down took his trash can to the curb. The streetlights came on. I turned on the lamp and waited. For a while, nothing happened. Then, right around the usual time, I heard footsteps again. I stayed in my chair and pretended to scroll through my phone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him stop across from the house, in the same place he had been the night before. He stood there long enough that my phone screen went dark. He did not move closer this time. He just stayed in that one spot, facing my windows, like he was keeping track of the fact that I had decided to sit there and act like everything was normal. I'm 19, and I live in this really small town in upstate New York. The kind of place that doesn't even have a proper main street anymore. Just a few old buildings, and a post office that's only open 3 days a week. The neighboring town is slightly bigger, but still pretty dead. Nothing ever happens around here. Anyway, this happened about a month ago. My younger brother had gone to a party at his friend's place in the next town over, and my parents made me go pick him up since they didn't trust him to get a ride with anyone who'd been drinking. I was annoyed about it because it was already past midnight, and I'd been in bed watching stuff on my laptop, but I got dressed and headed out. The drive between our towns is only about 15 minutes, mostly just one long road that cuts through some fields and past a few farms. There's barely any traffic that late at night, especially on a weeknight. I got to the house where the party was and texted my brother. He came out a few minutes later and got in the car. He seemed fine, not drunk or anything, just tired. We started heading back home and he fell asleep in the passenger seat almost immediately. About 5 minutes into the drive, I noticed a car pulled over on the side of the road with its hazards on. As I got closer, I could see someone standing next to it, waving their arms like they needed help. It was a woman, maybe in her 40s, and she looked distressed. I slowed down, trying to decide if I should stop. My brother was asleep, and it was just me, and something about stopping on a dark road in the middle of nowhere made me nervous. But she looked genuinely upset, so I pulled over a little bit ahead of her car. I rolled down my window and asked if she was okay. She rushed up to my car and started talking really fast, saying her car had broken down and her phone was dead, and she needed to call someone. I told her I could call for her and asked who she wanted me to contact. She suddenly got quiet and just stared at me. Then she asked if I could give her a ride to the next town instead. Something about the way she asked made me uncomfortable. I told her I could call a tow truck, but I couldn't give her a ride because I had to get my brother home. She leaned closer to my window and looked into the back seat. Then, at my brother sleeping in the passenger seat, she asked how old he was. That question creeped me out. I didn't answer, and just said I really needed to go, but I'd call someone for her. She stepped back from the car and didn't say anything else. I rolled up my window and pulled back onto the road, in my rearview mirror. I watched her walk back to her car, but she didn't get in. She just stood next to it watching me drive away. I called the non-emergency police number and reported the broken-down car, giving them the location. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to check it out. I felt better after that, like I'd done what I could. But then about 2 minutes later, I saw headlights come up fast behind me. I thought maybe it was the woman's car, that it hadn't actually been broken down. But the vehicle stayed pretty far back, just far enough that I couldn't tell what kind of car it was. It followed me like that for a few miles, matching my speed. I was getting nervous, so I shook my brother awake and told him someone was following us. He turned around to look, and that's when the headlights suddenly turned off. The car was still there. We could see its dark shape on the road behind us, but the lights were completely off. My brother asked what the hell they were doing, and I said I didn't know. I sped up more, and the dark car sped up too, still with no lights on. We were getting close to our town, and I just wanted to get home. I took the turn onto the road. That leads into our neighborhood, and the car followed. My brother asked if we should call the police, and I said yes. As he was dialing, The car suddenly turned its lights back on, bright beams that lit up the entire inside of our car. Then it started getting closer, like it was going to rear-end us. I pressed the gas and we were going way too fast for that narrow road, but I didn't care. My brother was on the phone with the dispatcher trying to explain what was happening and give our location. The car behind us dropped back a little, but kept following. We came into the actual town, passing the post office and the old grain elevator, and I thought maybe whoever it was would turn off now that we were in a more populated area. But they didn't. They followed us all the way to our street. I pulled into our driveway and my brother and I jumped out and ran for the front door. The car slowed down as it passed our house, and I got a look at it finally. It was a dark sedan, maybe black or dark blue, and I couldn't see who was driving because the windows were tinted. It kept going down the street and turned at the end of the block. My brother and I got inside and locked the door. My parents woke up from all the commotion, and we explained what happened. The police showed up about 10 minutes later and took a report, but they said without a license plate number or a better description of the car, there wasn't much they could do. They drove around the neighborhood looking for the sedan, but didn't find it. One of the officers mentioned that they'd sent someone to check on the broken-down car I'd reported earlier, but when they got there was no car and no woman. That made everything feel even worse. If her car hadn't actually been broken down, then the whole thing had been some kind of setup. Maybe she was trying to get me to stop and let her in the car, and when I didn't, whoever was with her started following us. My brother had nightmares for a week after that. He kept saying he woke up right when the woman was looking at him through my window, and the way she'd stared at him made him feel sick. My parents wanted to know why the woman had asked about my brother's age, and I didn't have an answer. None of us did. The police suggested maybe it was an attempted carjacking or robbery, but that doesn't explain the question about my brother, or why her car had disappeared by the time they checked. I just know that whatever was supposed to happen that night didn't happen, because I didn't let that woman in my car, and I'm really glad I trusted my gut on that.